Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. We had a great topic today on how do you really get data out of the CRM and make sense of it without just the dashboards, the simple stuff. That's not enough. We really need to understand exactly what's going on so that we can really make decisions and judgment calls about pricing, territories, target markets, what's working and what isn't, what makes financial sense and what doesn't. And we get into exactly the only reason companies go out of business is they run out of money. And we're going to get into this today, and it's really going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. But before we do, make sure you're checking out App2Zen. App2Zen.com is the place to find the greatest salespeople, the best marketing people, the best leaders. App2Zen.com. Check it out. Let's get into the interview. Hey, Fred, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi. Happy to be here. So my name is Fred Shilmover, and I'm the CEO and founder of Insight Squared. Insight Squared is a sales intelligence company. The way I typically describe us is we've built all the reports you wish Salesforce.com already had. So that's us in a nutshell.
How did you come up with or get interested in this?
So I've always been an analytical guy. I always believe in bringing data to solve the problem. And where I first came up with this idea, I went to business school, and I didn't have the typical background for folks in business school, and I met a lot of people with management consulting background and finance background, operations backgrounds, and all of these tools that I learned around finance and accounting and marketing and strategy, I thought back to when I ran a small business, earlier in my career, and thought, gosh, if I had these tools, if I had this toolkit, how much better of a business could I have run? And the reality that I've learned since is it's not really limited to small businesses. And in general, there's an opportunity to up-level the way businesses are run. In terms of being more data-driven, being more analytical, being more operationally focused. And we turned our focus to sales. I think, if you think about what keeps me up at night, I'm worried about revenue. Businesses, one of our investors likes to tell me, businesses only fail for one reason. They run out of cash. So, the way you get cash is you run a tight ship and you drive revenue. So, I've always been tied at the hip with our head of sales. I have a pretty good expectation that our CFO will manage costs correctly, but the area of greatest uncertainty in the business tends to be how we're going to perform in sales. So that's sort of how we, as Insight Squared, and how I personally declared a major and said, the area where I want to apply analytics is all around sales and sales performance.
Now, sales analytics, it's kind of a weird space in that, people went through the transition to actually having a CRM and getting people to use it. And then there's the dashboards that everyone's in love with. But who do you sell to? Is it the VP of sales or sales ops? Is it CFOs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we interact with all parts of the revenue organization. One area of really big focus for us has been sales operations, and we ran a conference in August called RAMP, and it was the first ever conference exclusively focused on the sales operations profession. And we believe, and I think there's a lot of strong evidence to support that there's this rising tide of analytically, operationally driven sales organizations, and with that, this need for operations talent. And I think if I step back even further, there's, you mentioned CRM adoption being a change. There is this absolute sea change that's been happening. It probably started 10 years ago, but really in the last 5 years has picked up pace in this shift of sales from this, artisanal in the field. We don't know what the people are doing, and if they hit their number, they're our heroes, and if they don't, we don't know why. To much more structured sales process, oftentimes done inside versus field. And there's a couple of industry changes that have supported that. One is this idea of consumerization of IT. So we sell in the tech industry, and Moore's law, where the CPUs double in performance and halve in price every 18 months. There's been this trend of technology getting more and more low cost and more accessible. And as a result, you can't afford these very expensive salespeople flying around the country doing the traditional steak dinners and that type of a thing. And that consumerization of IT and the reduction in prices of technology has driven, in my opinion, sales to be inside. The other big trend is improvement in technology, and we think Insight Squared is part of that story. But if you think about a typical sales organization today, there is a sales tech stack. This idea didn't really exist 5 years ago. You think of marketing as having the budget for programs and technology, and sales as having the budget for headcount, human capital, and T&E. But now we're here talking over Skype. There's video conferencing technology. There's advancements in CRM. There's analytics like Insight Squared. There's sales content technology, and all of these technologies are there to create more efficiency in sales. So there's been this huge change in sales as an industry, and as a result, we believe that sales leaders and sales operations leaders are going to more and more be traveling in pairs. This partnership between the art of the sale and the science of the sale. So we sell to both, but we've really chosen to focus on sales operations and really sort of elevating the sales operations career as a focal point of Insight Squared.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about the sales ops thing, because I always when I was a rep, always had this frustration that, all these salespeople and sales managers were spending 25 to 50% of their time doing ops work. And it was just insane that they call you to fill in a square or a field in Salesforce because the forecast wasn't being generated. And it's like, oh, can't we have somebody do this? Somebody to really manage this.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described, it's somewhat fundamentally different work. If I do my personality assessment, I'm personally very skewed towards the analytical and the operational, and oftentimes sales leaders are more focused on vision and communication and team building and those types of things. So that feeling that you just emotionally described, do I really have to do this? There are folks like myself and like many of the folks at Insight Squared and in the sales operations community that love that stuff. Like for me, part of our goal is to create efficiency so people don't have to spend their time in Excel. But when I spend time doing analysis work in Insight Squared or in whatever tool, those are happy times for me. So I get a lot of sort of existential meaning out of that work. So I think that it's a good place to do division of labor because it's fundamentally different skill sets and, quite frankly, sometimes different people.
Yeah, definitely different people, and typically not the traditional sales personality type that fits that.
So we did a research study with the team at LinkedIn. They've obviously amassed the world's best repository of data on people and careers and jobs and roles, and we looked at these operational roles. And what you said, we found to be true, which is there's a real diversity of backgrounds of people in operational roles, more so than in other roles in terms of diversity, in gender and in education, in backgrounds. So it's a relatively new field. New field. It's a very high growth field. So, there's a huge and growing number of job openings that in our view, folks are having a hard time filling them. So, I think it's a pretty exciting time if you're in sales operations or thinking of a career in sales operations. It's a good time to be in that.
So, take us through the early days. How did you get your first couple of customers? I got to believe that this would be a pretty hard product to sell, at least at first.
Yeah, so it's a great question. The way we started was pretty manual. So before raising venture capital or before building a team, I wanted to validate that there was a real business here. And what I mean by that is analytics and the field that we're in, this idea of business intelligence, it's not a new field. It's been around for 30 plus years. and has, in my opinion, largely been unchanged. Like the best analytics tool out there that's sort of the most ubiquitous, we all know it, it's Microsoft Excel. And most business intelligence tools, dating back to the 80s, they were thinking through, how do I, unblock the limitations of spreadsheets, more rows of data, relational data, I want it to update automatically, fancier charts, whatever. But they didn't sort of step back and rethink the problem the way I think we did it Insight Squared, and certainly the way that the cloud creates opportunity for. So the thesis for us very early on was analytics and BI doesn't have subject matter expertise built in. It's basically this blank slate that if you are naturally analytical and you want to spend a ton of time, you can get to a great answer, but that covers about 1% of the population or even less. For us normal mere mortals who have a busy schedule, we just don't have time for that. So, our approach was, let's not try to solve every problem for every person. Let's declare that major. And our major was sales. And let's focus on a set of problems. And we interviewed sales operations and sales leaders. And this is kind of how I started at the very beginning, and said, if you could wave a magic wand, that's one of my co-founders' favorite lines. If you could wave a magic wand and get any answer to any question in sales, what would help you drive your business better? And I interviewed lots of companies, and I found pattern. There were consistent things that people needed to do well. I need to manage my reps better. I have this very expensive resource on my team, and I want to make sure as I hire people, they ramp well, that I have consistency in production, that I manage their performance. I want to manage my pipeline better. I've got this incredibly perishable asset, this sales pipeline, that if I don't act properly on it, it's going to disappear. Do I have enough pipeline? Should I focus my energy on pipeline generation or pipeline execution? Forecast accuracy is another one. My credibility is based on my ability to forecast accurately. By the way, all of our company planning, capacity planning, hiring, all that is based on me sort of calling my shot and following through and hitting my number. And then all of the things around, planning and analysis, board preparation, QBRs, all that kind of thing. Those are the patterns that we saw when we talked to customers. So initially what I did is essentially free consulting work. And I found a set of 5 customers and found the consistent pattern across them, things they wanted answers to. And I did it manually. I actually spent about 20 hours per weekend. And, we called ourselves a SaaS company, but it was spreadsheets as a service. So like every Saturday and Sunday for these initial times during the company founding, I'd run all this analysis, run all these scripts, put it into very fancy spreadsheets and email them with a mind towards, could, a competent team build this into a product. So I didn't want to do something that was too one-off, too ad hoc. I essentially ran the same analysis for all 5 of these customers. Yeah, and eventually, came time to ask one of the customers, like, look, and there's still a customer of ours out here in Waltham. Like, look, I want to raise money. I want to build a team. Are you willing to pay me for my work? And before the guy said yes, I said, Dave, think about this really carefully, because no matter what you pay me, it'll still be less than minimum wage for all the work I've done for you over the last 6 months. But I'm going to make some really big decisions on, is what I'm giving you driving value in your organization? And that's how we signed our first customer. And then my co-founders joined me, and they turned this spreadsheet and script that I was running into a software product, and evolved it greatly since then.
Yeah, because I've always found it funny that, because I've worked for, tiny, 10-person startups all the way up to, the world's largest computer company. And everybody does the same thing. They put it all into some CRM, and then that CRM generates a spreadsheet, and then somebody goes crazy with it, And I'm like,
yeah, well, that last mile problem, that's a real big problem, because, well, 2 issues. One, you mentioned it earlier, like, oh gosh, I have to fill this box out in the CRM. There's this asymmetry of value where, the individual contributors, the reps, have to spend time updating the CRM, but the value is accrued to the managers. And unless you change that asymmetry and you balance it, and you use analytics for and the data in the CRM for coaching to show people like how can you improve, how can you get a bigger W-2, you're going to have that real problem. The other real big problem is that last mile of spreadsheets where everyone comes into a meeting and you spend half the time arguing whose numbers are right. And one of the things, the values that we provide is this idea of single version of the truth, where when people trust our solution has the right answer and we've overcome that, now we can focus on the actual meat of the discussion and talk about what these numbers mean. And that sort of arguing over whose spreadsheet is right is a real big problem.
Yeah, and there's also the, what do you want to see? I'll provide it for you. I mean, there was, the classic 3x your pipe or your quota in pipeline. And it becomes kind of a myth because no one really believes it, but everybody's forced to do it. And I think if there was a way of really, determining the definition of, a stage of a sale and the likelihood of it closing.
Yeah, you just brought up this everyone says 3x pipeline coverage, yeah. And so rules of thumb drive me mad. Another fun example is when we work with customers and they name their stages with percentages. This is my 50% stage. This is my 95% stage. And without exception, when we go in and actually look at their data, two things. One, obviously they're wrong. But two, they have this rose-colored view of the world. Their 50% stage is generally 20%. Their 95% stage is generally 70%. So, and the same thing with pipeline coverage. It varies business to business. It varies quarter to quarter. It varies, across different product lines or business units, and relying on rules of thumb is a pretty sloppy way of doing business in today's day and age.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's, the last day of the quarter and there's just a panic and the deal either closes or it doesn't. Then everybody takes, vacation and everyone forgets the misery they went through. Tell us about your sales strategy and what's working for you today.
So, we sell to a focused market. We sell primarily to the Salesforce.com ecosystem. So one of the big changes for us in our sales model over the last 2 years has been moving from this, very wide aperture, whether you call it an inbound model, to account-based sales and account-based marketing, where we know where our customers are. Our customers, a lot of them are going to be at Dreamforce next month. Where we've got an absolutely huge presence this year, and as a result, we've gotten a lot more targeted rather than trying to sort of boil the ocean with our sales and marketing strategy. We've started to augment our data, and this goes back to our conversation about sales operations. Sales operations plays a huge role at Insight Squared in terms of manicuring the database, defining our target account structure, doing things like data validation and making sure that we have the highest quality data so that we can intelligently target our accounts. There's no concept for us of, is this marketing led or sales led? Is this marketing generated or sales generated? We team up. Marketing warms them up, and then we work them collaboratively. So that's been a really big change, and I think really effective for us. I think just like many modern sales organizations, we do have division of labor. So we have, marketing doing demand generation, BDRs qualifying, and working with target accounts, and account executives working, past first meeting or pitching in if there's a shortfall in pipeline production. So we have that modern sort of sales organization. But the biggest change for us has been moving from this, round robin, boil the ocean, inbound strategy to a much more focused account-based strategy.
And what was the catalyst there? Was it, new technology that's now available to, go after, the exact targets where you can tell they have Salesforce, they're this size, they already haven't committed to a competitor, they have a sales ops person. What was your reason for doing that?
I think it was stage of company for us. I think, early on when we were first figuring out product market fit, when everything was greenfield to us, like we didn't have a database of companies. We didn't really know who our ideal customer profile was. So I think we took more more sort of traditional approaches, writing blog posts, doing email marketing, doing broad-based paid strategies, until we really honed in and figured out, we need to find companies with sales operations. We have a mature database with information in it that we can trust, so we can actually get focused and improve our yield and efficiency. So I think for us it was a stage of company and company maturity that was the catalyst for that change.
And how much more effective have you found it? Hard to tell.
It's a good question. How do I mean, the answer is that it's the absolute right strategy for us.
Yeah.
My being a numbers guy, I'm thinking, how do I quantify that for you? But the answer is it's just a much more effective, efficient strategy. And the strategy that we started with, it's not sustainable. Basically. We picked the lowest hanging fruit of that strategy and needed to move on and mature. And I think that's the case with any marketing strategy. You sort of you jump in. There's this great, but there's a diminishing returns curve on whatever you do. So in the beginning, the marketing tactic works well, and over time, you need to figure out something new and take that next step. So I think we were reaching a point where we needed a new strategy. So it's absolutely been effective for us.
That's it. Because today, ABM and just certainly technology, it's almost easier to find somebody than hope somebody finds you. Meaning that, kind of the inbound strategy kind of surfaced the fish. But today we already know who the fish are, so we can go out and get them.
Yeah, and I think, back to that point about diminishing returns, when nobody was blogging, when nobody was emailing,
right. Yeah.
that's a very effective technique. But over time, that strategy becomes saturated, and there's just so much noise. So being targeted and being customized and sending people, part of our philosophy, and this actually has been a change, but part of our philosophy here is we need to act in service of the market. It's less about, can you buy our software? Even though we're confident that it would deliver value, and more about, can we teach you something? Can we provide value to you in your day-to-day work? This is why, when we held RAMP, that our sales operations focused conference, it wasn't about product pitches or telling people about Insight Squared. We actually got that feedback from people like, hey, when are you going to do the features discussion?
Demo.
And no, the goal was to drive value and elevate the field. And we brought in, fantastic speakers who talked about their experiences and who talked about how do you elevate your career and think about your career progression in sales operations. We brought in this gentleman, David McCandless, who's a data journalist, who just explained to us how you tell stories with data. And, my takeaway was, it's not just about being right. It's about convincing people and bringing them along on the journey. So that's our approach in general in the market, and definitely with sales is how do we drive value. And I think with all of the noise out there, with the amount of email marketing and BDRs reaching out every day, if you're not personalized, if you're not driving value, it's very hard to stand out. And as a result, the conversion of all that activity has been going down, I think, for the entire industry, as there's more saturation of that tactic that I think is at this point dated.
Yeah, it definitely is. Now, take us through maybe your ideal customer who's, adopted your technology and has gotten tremendous value out of it. What are they getting out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our ideal customer, and look, we work with all types of businesses at all types of stages. The way I would just describe it is, if you have Salesforce.com and you have salespeople and you don't have Insight Squared, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. So that's the broadest definition.
You are now qualified.
So, yeah, I don't want to turn people off, but I mean, I think the ideal customer for us is someone who's running a modern sales program where you have enough velocity where you can adapt. So where your sales cycle is such that if you see a problem and you change a behavior, you could adapt and see, did the results change, and constantly experiment. So our ideal customers tend to have inside sales, division of labor. If you have BDRs and you have account executives, we actually have two different modules for those two different job functions. We work with a lot of technology companies, not only technology companies, but we work with a lot of technology companies because they tend to be early adopters. And especially if you've ever, raised any kind of funding, you have an imperative for growth. So one of the things that is a requirement, I think, for you to be successful with Insight Squared is to want to change, to want to improve. If your business did 100 million last year and you want to do 100 million this year and you're perfectly happy and the market is static, I'm not sure if you need a tool like Insight Squared. I'm not sure if you need to, improve how your reps perform if you're happy. But if you're trying to grow your team and you want to hire new reps and figure out, okay, what does success look like? How do I model success in my business? And how do I replicate success with new members of the team? How do I reduce variability in execution? How do I make sure that I'm providing the right resources to the team so that, that deal doesn't slip out of the pipeline at the end of the month? How do I, get my forecast plus or minus 5 or 10% so that, I have that predictability and credibility with my board. How do I not cram for the exam every time I've got a board meeting and have that cadence set up? So those are the 4 areas that we tend to help people with. And our ideal customer is someone who wants to improve their business.
Now, let's get back to that keyword growth. Going into next year or the next couple years, I mean, you get some great investors and I'm sure they have high expectations. How do you live up to that? What do you see as the key things? We talked about ABM. Anything else?
Yeah, I think, for us, we're thinking about how do we drive more value in the area where we have expertise. So our expertise is around sales intelligence and how do we use data to improve the quality of decision making. So I think part of it is just do more, grow the team, grow our marketing presence. We're at Dreamforce this year. Last year we had a bronze sponsorship. This year we have a platinum, gold, and silver sponsorship. So I think part of it is just scale. If we do the same thing we've been doing and we 5x the business or 10x the business, there's plenty of market opportunity where we could drive value for our customers just in that, but we're obviously not going to rest on our laurels, and we're expanding the types of things that we do. So, 2 months ago, we announced a product called Signals, which is going to push data and change the way that you interact with analytics. So right now, traditionally, analytics is something that you pull information out of. You log in, you explore. We've changed that from having to go through an analyst to CEOs, sales leaders, sales operation leaders to be able to go into our product and explore themselves, but they still have to go in or schedule reports to get sent out. Signals is going to find patterns, trends, anomalies in your data and push them out to you. Like, hey, did you know that this deal looks like to be at risk because the close date is pushed 5 times, or you've got a downward trend in your win rate in this particular segment. You may want to drill in and look at that. So we're changing the way that people interact with their data and their analytics with Signals. Just earlier this week, we introduced a partnership that we have with LinkedIn, where if you are a Salesforce customer and a LinkedIn Sales Navigator customer, we're going to be merging that data together to show you things like, if the depth of connections is higher in an account, is your win rate or your success rate in any way better? Things like that. So we're continuing to push the envelope from a product roadmap perspective, and we've got lots more in store that we'll be announcing in the coming months. But the other part of it is staying focused and sticking to our knitting. There's an area where we operate, which is helping sales and sales operations leaders make better decisions with their data. So I think there's a big part of what we have to do is stay focused.
Now, you haven't used the 2 words AI or artificial intelligence. Is that a reason, or is it that you're even focused on that at all? Or
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of
Too much hype.
Our Boston East Coast conservative nature
Yeah.
that comes in play. And look, first it was big data, then it
Yeah.
was predictive analytics, then it was machine learning, now it's AI. It's the same set of technologies, and it's not to say that it's all hype. There's something real there. We are as a species amassing more data at a faster rate than we ever have. We have more compute power than we ever have. We can find patterns and make decisions in ways that we never could before. And there are certain areas of business where that's real and happening today. You look at IBM Watson, you look at what we can do in medicine, life sciences, and what we can do with IoT, where there's actually all of these data points being collected. The problem with sales is twofold. One, that's like your AP class when there's still lots of opportunity on the remedial side. Like we've got to get the basics right
Yes.
before we go into that. And to our discussion around diminishing returns, you're going to get a lot more. There's a lot more low-hanging fruit in a lot of the basics of execution. Going back to where we started the conversation, I go to business school and I meet these people with these amazing backgrounds. I think, wow, if every business were operated with this level of thought, how much different would that be? So I think that's one point. The other thing that's really different in sales is it's not like IoT or even like digital marketing where there's millions of points of observation. There's oftentimes the data is too thin to bring to bear AI and ML and these types of technologies in a way that the confidence can be high. The margin of error is meaningful. So if I tell you like, look, you're going to book $1 million this month, plus or minus 80%. that doesn't really help you.
No,
and the reality is that if you have 50 or 100 or 200 sales opportunities in your pipeline, there may not be enough data, or you may not be operating in a way that's consistent enough for these algorithms to actually tell you that final answer. So it's not that we use machine learning in our tech stack, and signals will have an AI component to it, but that's not what we want to lead with. That's not the hype that we want to lead with. We want to focus in what is the value that we're actually driving for you as a sales organization, and it comes back to those 4 use cases that I mentioned.
Cool. So this has been great. Where do people go to learn more about you and Insight Squared?
Yeah, we're at www.insightsquared.com and at Insight Squared on Twitter.
That's it. We make such a huge investment in making sure people are putting all this stuff into CRM. We paid for it. We paid for all the stuff on top of it. We pay the reps to do it. We clean it. We cleanse it. We analyze it. Now you need to make sense of it to really get something out of it and determine how your business really runs. So Insight Square, check it out. Also, if you're going to be at Dreamforce, make sure you stop by and see them. Hey, I also want to thank Prezi for Business. Prezi for Business is a new partner of ours, and you got to check them out at prezi.com. Also, if you are doing demos, I did a great episode this week on the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast about how to do a demo right. The 9 elements of a killer closing demo. And me and my buddy Chad get on there. We chat it up for about a half hour. We talk about what we've seen work and what we've seen fail all the time. Make sure your sales team is checking that out. The Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Really appreciate everybody sharing the podcast. Just tell one friend, one CMO, one VP of sales, one CEO. I'd really appreciate that. Also, connect up with me on LinkedIn. And if you happen to see my content flying away, give it a little thumbs up, would you? Spread the love, will you? Hey, I really appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week.